My name is Jeff Smith, and I'm Makah tribal member, and my mother's from Nia Bay, Washington on the Makahs, and my dad's from Newport, Oregon. And so I'm glad to be here, and as a Makah tribal member, you can see that our reservation and our territory is right at the beginning of the watershed, or you could say it's at the end of the watershed, actually. So, and I think, geez, why didn't they name it the Makah Sea?
My name is Kat Steele, and I come from Northern California, about 45 minutes north of San Francisco, in a place called Fairfax. And I'm very grateful to be here. And I've been recently spending time on San Juan Island and really being overwhelmed by the beauty.
My name is Andrew. I grew up in the Skagit Valley, and I'm currently living on Orcas Island. And I go by he, they.
My name is Karen Taylor, and right now I live in Southern Oregon, Talent, Ashland area, and she works for me.
I'm Ralph Nessy. I'm from Gresham, Oregon. I go by he. My attachment to this place is, well, my sister lives here, and I've been since senior in high school, or just between for sure college. My first trip away from home in Eastern Washington was I came out to the San Juan Islands, over to Victoria, and down back to Seattle and home on a long weekend when I was like 18. Kind of fell in love with the islands after that. I've had sailboats and trailers and launched them and sailed around, and now have a boat down at Pleasant Harbor. We're up here for the day. And of course, my attachment to the sea is I keep coming here.
I'm Kay Raffo, lived out here for 7 years, had every intention of retiring to a place called Maine. And then this woman said to me, you ought to visit the Pacific Northwest. Came up here in the Pacific Northwest and said, I could live up here. So for 7 years we've been living here. We love it. It's gorgeous. People are friendly. And there's so much to learn. So very much.
My name is Carol Hernandez, originally from Southern California, but came up to the state of Washington to go to graduate school, and initially thought, oh my God, they don't know what the sun is around here. And had a tough time until I don't know what happened, but click. And so lived in Ohio for a while, but knew that where I needed to be was here. And so I'm fortunate to be able to live here and just down the road in Port Ludlow. Oh, and she.
I'm Mary Tolchin, and I am so grateful to be in this part of the world because of my son. I was born at the height of the Depression and the height of the Dust Bowl at a Dust Bowl farm in Oklahoma. And then we went to California to get food and jobs. And since then, I'm now at 86. I've never lived far from the water. I just can't, if I do that for a while, the next thing I know, I'm called back to the water. And nobody has more beautiful water than you people who are here. And it's an honor to be here and to see what you're going to do and make it really heaven on earth. It already is, but you're going to make it more so. Thank you. Hopefully, yes.
I'm Laura Martin, and I'm from various places. I was born in Ann Arbor, lived a lot in Portland, visited friends on Orcas Island a bunch when I was a kid, connection to there, and Mouse Bean Inlet in BC, and Argenta in southeastern BC, in the Kootenays, and I live in Port Townsend nowadays. And I got born into Quakers, friends, and have this aversion to putting anything in a category, so I just say that I'm me. And it's not always easy to figure out who me is, but I'm still trying.
Good job.
My name is Steely. I grew up on Duwamish territory and lived for some time on traditional Lummi territory. I'm eager to see what this discussion will bring.
Jamie, we use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I was born and spent my entire life in Bellingham on traditional Nooksack and Lummi territory. And I've spent my entire life living within a mile or so from the Salish Sea and feel really deeply connected. And as I grow, I'm still discovering all the ways in which I'm connected to this entire region.
My name is Nancy, and I like the pronoun Z. Neutral Z. Yeah. Z. Yeah. And I recently moved to Port Townsend, originally from the East Coast, but I love it up here, and I love being more connected with Native culture. The East Coast it's been a long time since we've had Native people there, so it's really wonderful to be so close to the culture here. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm Phil Lane Jr. I was born in a Haskell Indian school. My mom and dad met and attended school. My mom's Chickasaw, and my dad's Yankton Sioux, so I'm a member of the Yankton Sioux and Chickasaw Nations. And through the kindness of my father's roommate, Bruce LaCourse, from the Umatilla Nation, my father hitchhiked from Haskell Institute out to the Umatilla Reservation. That's where I really got to kind of know the Plateau tribes and so forth. And then eventually got a chance to, in 1975, go up and meet a lot of the Salish relatives from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam in that region. And I think have had the great opportunity to witness the incredible spiritual, I don't know the words to say it, the spiritual manifestation of light and power and strength that has come and seen. I mean, this canoe journey, many other dimensions of what's going on. Never before, ever, that I know of, in the early 1970s or late 60s was this occurring. But like a river, it's not even, there's no words. There's some things that go beyond the syllables and sounds of words, but they go beyond the world of names. And I think the spiritual that we're all part of, because, you know, we're one human family, and the hurt of one is the hurt of all, and the honor of one is the honor of all. I mean, I think that's the basic message, that we are one, you know. And what happens to any part of the web of this circle impacts all of us. And I think we're awakening to this simple spirituality. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
My real name is Perez David Magid Ben Yosef. I'm a Spanish Jew. My English name is Paul, which until my generation we got names to hide us from Christians. I was born in Seattle. My family is from Istanbul. We lived on a small island in the Bosphorus Sea and fished for 400 years after we were thrown out of Spain in 1492. Strange year to be But I've been fishing on the Salish Sea since I was a little boy. Fished out at Nia Bay, fished out everywhere, been on the water a lot, go up into Canada all the time, fish. I work a lot with Native Nations in Canada and the US. I feel very, even though I have not one drop of Native blood in me, I come from a tribal society, and as I tell my Native brothers and sisters, we've been running from the same people for 2,000 years. So, we relate. And I work a lot on the legalities and the minutiae of the oppression that comes from specifically the doctrine of discovery and things like that. And I try to work with my Native friends on various ends of that all over the country.
My name is Colin Sternagel. I grew up in he/him. I grew up in North Seattle. I was in the Coast Guard out of Station Bellingham. I worked as a dive master out of Bellingham, and I currently work as a sailing captain now, taking people on sail trips through the Salish Sea. So I've experienced my entire life above water, below water, up on all the trails and everything. And this is the place that I grew up in, the waters that I just totally know, and fish and spearfish and snorkeling. And now it's kind of my job to also encourage people to experience the same waters. And I think with that comes this massive responsibility of what I feel is happening to these waters. And so, I'm very concerned. I think I have a lot of hope for kind of more the larger stuff that we have on land, but when it comes to the waters of the Salish Sea, I'm deeply concerned.
Yeah, my name is Andy Jones. I grew up south of Seattle, loving the Salish Sea. I still remember as teenagers and not knowing any better, we'd go diving up along the coast and pull abalone off the rocks about 20 feet down, and not thinking anything about it, they're here, and remembering just walking along the beaches and digging up buckets of clams and landing on a beach and feel like there's a sprinkler system going, just all sorts of life. Since then I've made several trips up the Inside Passage, and of course further north you go, the more and more life we'd see. And I just think of this beautiful area here. Not that long ago, like you're saying, 100 years ago, it was much like Alaska is now. So I feel the same way Colin does. I'm deeply concerned and deeply care in my heart, and I really want to do what I can with the few resources that I have to pitch in and help in any way possible. So,
Hi, I'm Mary Water. I like both those names. And I was raised in the Midwest and came out here when I was fairly young. And so this is more my home than the Midwest is. And I, at one point, lived in, one of you is from Skagit Valley, yeah. And different things have happened, and I've ended up here in Port Angeles and feel, on the one hand, I had no idea that I was part of this wave that's moving here. I knew Port Angeles, but I didn't really know it all that well. And I come to find out that there's this enormous wave of people moving here. A friend of mine long ago used the frame "harvesting the view," and I thought that was a really good phrase. And harvesting the view. Yeah. And so having been in Washington long enough to see like the changes in the Skagit Valley, which I lived in long enough ago that it was more tulip fields than, whatever it is, urban sprawl. And I feel like truly I'm supposed to be here, here in this area. But I'm like you, I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility of what's going on here, and that I have co-opted this place as my home. As much as I feel like I've been called here, I feel like part of that is to be a part of what needs to happen here now. Because this place is so pure still. I mean, as damaged as it is, it's still so amazing, and we all know that. That's why we're here. And I just have a tremendous sense of responsibility that this is my work now. So I'm really grateful to be right here, right now.
And my name is David Shia, kind of new to the area, came here in October, was in Southwest Oregon before that for a few years, but really I was living in Maine for many years. That's grew up in the Northeast, so I've always been interested in the environment, and just trying to learn more about the Salish Sea, the whole bioregion here, and just here to learn. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Douglas Tolchin. I am, last several decades, from the Chekoten Creek Shed, which is a tributary of the Nooksack River Shed, which itself is a tributary of the Salish Sea Bioregional watershed community. And I guess as a young man, I was trained, taught to think a little bit as an investment banker in New York and Tokyo and so forth. And I guess I kind of had a little shift, experience with a whale a couple decades ago that caused me to decide that I would like to spend the rest of my life working with inhabitants of the Salish Sea bioregion as well as other bioregions to restore natural animal populations throughout our bioregions to more than 50% of historic levels as soon as possible, with the understanding that we're down to about the last 1 to 10% of free-living natural animals, depending on what species you want to talk about. Personally, I believe it is the great crime of our time. And it's half of that has happened in just the last 100 years. Almost all of it has happened in the last 1,000 years, which is not even in the last 1% of human history. And I believe, and I feel, and in a sense I feel like I know, that actually this particular watershed, this Salish Sea watershed, I believe is the nucleus of the dream that many have known as Cascadia, and that bioregion. But before the dream of Cascadia can be realized and as a role model for the world, first this Salish Sea watershed community has to recognize and remember itself. All the inhabitants, the indigenous, non-indigenous people together, all the current inhabitants, 8 million people living in our watershed community, and from that place of watershed community consciousness to make this agreement to restore the natural animals to more than 50% of historic levels. And when we do everything that's necessary to do that, I believe we get everything else. The trees, the water, the birds, then we get heaven on earth. But we need to do it for the animals and the free living natural animals, place them in the middle and work ourselves around it, which is sort of the opposite of what's been going on for the last 1,000 years. So then try it the opposite way and we'll be closer to the truth.
I know I'm out of sequence, but I'd like to speak as I I decided to videotape this because I very much care about the Salish Sea. I was born in Massachusetts. My parents brought me out to California when I was 4 years old. I lived in the San Bernardino area for a while, and then we moved to Pomona. And You know, I lived there until I decided to not live there, which was in my 20s, and I moved to Ojai, California, and became very aware of the Chumash tribe in the Ventura, Ojai area, and really liked what I saw with that native population, and remember some of their actions having to do with I can't remember the name, but there was a coastline, and they were having issues with some... I beg your pardon? The Gaviota coastline, and there were some problems with some development that we're trying to put in there. And it was the native population that prevented that from happening. And now I see, it seems to me that people are waking up and being aware that the indigenous population can help us to understand what we did that was so wrong. And I have to admit that the whale who was carrying her baby, it just broke my heart. And I look out, and I want to be positive, but I look out over the Salish Sea, and it's so damn beautiful, and I just love it so much. And yet I know that underneath there's not a lot going on in terms of life, and I'm trying to reconcile that somehow in my brain, because this is a beautiful place to live, but there's a lot to be done, and I'm looking forward to the next steps and what has to be done. I'm just looking forward to it. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for sharing some things about yourself and your names. And so yeah, I was just thinking of kind of doing a little bit of popcorn. Maybe just the issues that you see going on in the Salish Sea personally. It's maybe one thing that you've seen going on that needs healing, that needs wellness, that needs fixing.
I used to, when I was a boy fishing, I used to, we'd never go out with bait, we'd go out and there'd be herring balls, and we, go get some herring, and then we go get some salmon, and the herring are just, I don't find them anywhere after being this, really, I don't know what to say about it. It's like shocking to me and frightening. And I don't know what's going on up in Canada. I go up there a lot, but I have friends who say it's pretty much the same as the herring. I don't know what the salmon are surviving on. Does anybody else in touch with that?
Forage fish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're overfishing those for sure, right? Collecting them up in big, huge, purse seine nets, I believe, making them into animal feed, and it's criminal. Is that right? That's the basis of the food source for the salmon, right?
And the seals.
And the seals and everything else. So the salmon have promised to feed the circle of life in our Salish Sea, and we made promises to them that we would make sure that they would continue until the end of time and never be disrespected as Indigenous people of the Salish Sea. And we can no longer hold that promise because of the enormous detriment that colonialism has served the waters and the land, and colonization has just been is devastated. As we've already looked at those numbers in the Salish Sea, it's around 95% is the best that I can, just as a general number. Ancient forests, and where do the salmon live, right? They live in the roots of a cedar tree and in the water and the gravel and the clean water there in an ancient forest. And so how much ancient forest do we have left in the Salish Sea?
1%.
Yeah, somewhere 1 to 5%. And so they're homeless. Our salmon are homeless. And they feed the circle of life, so all the other animals, the natural animals, are then almost too. They don't live in a cropland. The salmon they don't fight their way home to a crop. No, they fight their way home to that ancient forest that's a complete ecosystem. So yeah, when we think about what we need to do, as Doug already talked about, that forest has value, and if we want salmon, if we want the circle of life to be well around us, and we want the Salish Sea to thrive, one of the things that I'm very impassioned about is ancient forests. We're the cedar tree people here. We're the salmon people here. We are the canoe people. We are the potlatch people here. The sharing people, giving. And those cedar trees, we continue to make promises to today also. And we would never just go, we actually didn't go and kill any of the ancients, the giants that were as wide or wider than this room, 23 feet across, the largest ones. We didn't need to do that because we understood that would serve a disrespect. So to the animal people and the circle of life, and then that gift would end because it would be disrespected. So that's a huge problem, right? Yeah, and I think that we need to put pressure on our. I'm all about direct action, and I'm not about just begging upon our politicians, because we know that it doesn't produce enough results. Sometimes it produces something after a long period of time, and we don't have a long period of time right now. The ecocide is at our doorstep, and we need direct action, as some of the current leaders have spoken. A 16-year-old Swedish young woman, Greta Thunberg, said, act as if your house is on, she started a worldwide movement within months. Act as if your house is on fire, she says, because it is. Direct action now. Direct action now. And we cannot simply believe that we can change something within the system to get results. We need a whole new system. And she speaks to these adults at the UN, UK Parliament, and tells them, you're not mature enough. You are not mature enough to create a future for us, so we will do it ourselves. And those are the kind of actions that we need. The 1.5 million youth on the streets a month ago, I went to the one in Seattle, 800 youth, not one on their phone. And they kept track of that one, Fridays for Future hashtag. And 1.5 million youth walked out of school on that particular day worldwide, 274 nations, and almost all 50 states. Those are the things that we need, and they got results because along with them and Extinction Rebellion, in 1,100 arrests in England in the last 2 weeks. The UK Parliament announced a climate emergency, the first country in the whole world to ever announce and proclaim a climate emergency. So direct action can get results, and I believe that's where we need to go to, and really start standing up for these futures. And, there's all kinds of ways to do it. We have people here that are working on it. I've been working alongside, Doug helped working for that future in different ways. I'm a direct action person, so I just wanted to speak that. So thank you for bringing that out. Any other things that you see?
One of the things that we found this place on the river where the dam came down, and we kind of finagled our way to get to the mouth. You're not supposed to go there, but we did. And we went there, and to our amazement, we're standing there at a bend. 8 eagles in 2 trees. The fish were just all over the place. And it was like, oh my God, why can't we do this all the other ways? I mean, it was just absolutely stunning to see that taking place.
Right.
And we were right there, and it was like, oh my God, what do we have to do?
Yeah, that's great. And scientists had predicted that those wild salmon right there in the Elwha would take many, many years to ever even show back up. Exactly. And they were there waiting. They're banging their heads against these dams, Now, they're beating their heads against them right now, those 4 dams on the lower Snake there, they're beating their heads on them right now.
And speaking about that,
We need to get rid of this.
is the length of time it's going to take. Look at how long it took to get this river cleared. It's the length of time it will take us to get the others down for the watershed to benefit.
And in the whole Turtle Island, the United States of America, there's thousands of dams, and probably most of them are stopping runs of wild fish and salmon. And the 4 dams on the lower Snake are in particular bringing a great detriment to our salmon and our Qualamich and our killer orca people, you know. And so, yeah, we gotta get those dams down. And they say that you could get about a 20% increase in salmon just like that. And those dams are costing us money.
The Colville Reservation, and whenever we do a protest, we go to the same spot, which is right in front of Chief Joseph Dam, which is where the salmon stop. Right? There's nothing goes past that. That's where we always go. But like, how is that? That is generating electricity. That is this huge monolithic, you know, they put bazillions of dollars into it. They're super invested in it. There's no fish getting past it. When is that going to come down?
And they're defending it like, the government is defending it like crazy, as if it is, in the movie Dam to Extinction, you could hear one of the politicians saying, there's more salmon. There are larger salmon runs now since we put these dams in. Like, why is that? Oh my God, it's insane. So anyway, we all know it's insanity, and they need to come down, and it's just costing us money. So yeah, dam removal.
Well, I wonder about the cities. I just moved up here from Tacoma, and there's one stream that still has salmon, Swan Creek, and it's only because it's in between jurisdictions. Like the city owns a little piece, the county owns a little piece, and the Puyallup tribe owns a little piece. So nobody ever developed it. But all the other creeks have been paved over or just depleted so that there's no salmon in them.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I wonder about all the other areas of development and also all the runoff from the city, even in Swan Creek. That's what we were looking at, was how the runoff from the city was bringing down the micro vertebrates, which, you know, feed the whole life of the stream, which feed the salmon anyway. So, yeah.
That's a big problem, yeah, runoffs from automobiles, oil that drip out the cars, yeah, basically rushing into our waterways.
Dog food is one of the main ones.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, fecal matter from pets, yeah, that's a big one too. And then what about Victoria? What about Victoria, BC, that just shoves their poop, the whole city's poop, right into the Salish Sea?
Untreated.
And they're actually building the solution.
They are, they got it?
Finally,
they're working on it?
It's supposed to be completed.
Thank the spirit, yeah, so there's a victory. The more we talk about it, I guess, yeah, I think.
Well, the fish have chemicals in them now. The medications that people are taking are making it into the water, and the fish have Valium in their bodies. And things. I mean, it's just
medications.
It's just crazy.
We live in a state with wonderful forests, right? Do you know what they spray on those forests? Glyphosate.
Yeah.
And that kills, can you say it? That's it. And it kills everything, including human beings. And they suggest that if you want to know how affected you are, tell your doctor to run a blood test with that chemical. They're finding it in everything.
That's why we need ancient forests.
Well, hello.
Yeah, and then we don't kill the trees, and then we don't have to put that junk on the land to say that we're going to fertilize them with this and stop some weeds from growing with this. We're just going to let nature do its thing and have ancient forests.
If you locally,
Say the name of that again?
Glyphosates. Roundup. Glyphosates.
Locally,
Roundup is the Roundup.
It's the same thing.
Just on a kind of juxtapose, anyway, I'd just like to share 2 little vignettes as kind of a hopeful thing to understand, you know, how kind of all-powerful we are, and we can actually accomplish anything that we agree on. You know, it's like the power of agreement, but also in combination with direct action. Just 2 little vignettes from animal history. And as a former investment banker, the numbers, I feel speaking specific numbers can be very powerful, not just generally. So if we look at the history of bison, which is sort of related like salmon of the Salish Sea, or like the bison of the plains. Bison used to be the largest biomass of mammals on Earth, the largest. There are about 60 million of them in Turtle Island, North America. It was government policy, and actually in around the 1880s, within about 1 decade, half of all those bison were wiped out intentionally. $2 each was paid to do it. And actually, not only half of them were wiped out in 1 decade, but 99.999% of them, literally, were wiped out within 1 century. And they had been here for about 11 million years. So we went from 60 million bison in Turtle Island to 600, okay, which is 1/1000th of 1%. So that's a tragedy. That was horrible. Of course, it was done intentionally to take away the food, the spirituality, everything of the indigenous people. And so, but look at what happened. A few good-natured people back in the day decided, and by the way, it was government policy to get rid of every last one and to even erase the memory that they had been here. But a few good people decided, you know, we're going to hide away a few bison here and a few bison there, and they were probably mostly colonists at the time, but they chose to do that. And because of that, and as long as you have 2 at least, you have hope. So then what happened, we're down to 600. Within the next 100 years, we've gone from 600 to 600,000. So we've had a 1,000-fold increase just by some direct action, people just without permission hiding them away and keeping them alive for a day when the political winds had changed. But then through agreement and tribal leadership at Fort Peck and others, and Yellowstone and Teddy Roosevelt, and a lot of different people, through a lot of series of agreements, have achieved a 1,000-fold increase. Now what's interesting, that 1,000-fold increase at 600,000 is only 1% of what used to be here. But it shows you how quickly things can come back. A 1,000-fold increase of bison. Now the question is, how many bison do we want to have? No one asks anybody, do we want 1% of historic levels that we have now? Do we want 10%, 20%, more than 50%? It would be good to have that conversation. On our coast, just as another little vignette, let's talk about humpback whales for a moment. There used to be probably around 400,000 humpback whales in the Pacific Ocean. They were down to the last 400 come the 1970s, when all of a sudden everyone realized that they were going to take every last one until they were gone, because there was money, until there was an international agreement in around 1970 to completely stop, to restrain the vices of humans, to just stop killing humpback whales, just stop doing it. And today we have 40,000. That's a 100-fold increase in humpback whales since 1970. Now it's still probably only at 10% of what used to be there. But it shows how all-powerful our agreements are. And that most of what has to happen is to restrain the vices of our fellow human beings and to count these things and to have transparency with everyone of how many puffins do we have? How many sea otters? How many did we used to have? How many do we want to have? And to track it every year openly and transparently in like a Salish Sea census of life. But to go retrospective to how many were here 200 years ago, 100 years ago, today, how many do we want? And to build towards that with kind of if you remember the Marshall Plan, after World War II, the United States, whoever did it, made the decision to dedicate 40% of the GDP of America to rebuild the economy of Europe. And in 4 years, it went from 85% unemployment to 85% employment. That's how quickly these things can change. So I just throw that out as a metaphor. And the herring are so critical. We should have a 5-year moratorium on herring fishing. And the roe herring kill fishery that the Department of Fisheries out of Ottawa should just be abolished forever. That's insane. And the feeding of it to pigs and chickens should be against the law. But we can make the laws, and we need to make these laws. And there's a lot of laws, but the herring's a really critical one.
Yeah. I have friends, actually, a friend of mine is from high school, he's a first PhD in studying first growth forests, right? To actually study how ancient forests work scientifically in Canada. right? So he tried to get his, UBC to get his doctorate through the forestry department. They said, well, that's not really what we do. We said we have to cut down forests, we don't study the forest, right? And so he had to go through the zoology department. But his wife works a lot, she works with Native folks. She studies what people ate before contact. And so she's really, if you're really interested, they work out of Simon Fraser, actually, they're both professors there. And they work a lot on the herring thing, because they're scared to death. I know I'm scared to death. That's like the first thing is like, because it used to be like, come March, the herring would be there, and they're just, I don't know if you've ever seen herring balls, but they're just unbelievable. And just to have nothing, nowhere, just, it's weird. And yeah.
That's one of our traditional foods is just putting out some cedar boughs or hemlock boughs and those herring legs all over them, and you just eat them up. They're so good. Yeah, you collect them. My mom loves them. They're there. Yeah, and they're just, everything's harder to get. Yeah.
So in this conversation, I'm hearing sort of two things. There's problem identification, and then there's solution. And a lot of it's been like the herring balls are gone, or there's wastewater runoff, or we seem to know the issues, and I'm really curious about less so about what's wrong, and more so about what we want. And so I've heard a few things. I've heard reforestation, old growth forests. I've heard moratorium on herring fisheries, and so I'm curious about what other people want to see.
Or maybe what people are already doing. Well, I spent 20 years with the Columbia River in the Dalles, and one of the ideas that was perennially laying underneath was a tiny fragment of your electric bill dedicated to buying up the riparian zones of the tributary creeks, which are all up and down the Columbia River. There's used salmon-bearing and steelhead-bearing creeks that go up every so many miles, big and little of every size. And they could never, through the Columbia River Compact and agreement with the power companies, get that tiny fragment, which could have, the calculation was just a tiny, tiny toll on your pay, where they could have bought up all those creeks, fenced them off, got the rights, got the riparian zones back, and the spawning rivers. This is an idea that was around in the 70s, in the 80s. And you couldn't even see it on your power bill. And for reasons, one guy tried to explain it to me. Of course, it came down to somebody was working on 1% on a spreadsheet somewhere, and it wasn't okay. I don't know how that had more power than restoring, playing a simple, easy solution, which you could see, eyeball creek. You can fix that.
Culvert. Yeah, the tribes sued the state of Washington to fix something like 1,000 culverts, something like that. Yeah, so there's something going on right there that's very positive.
But there was a funding mechanism proposed. It would have been, it would have been easy. It still would be easy when you solved it. But, now there's more building, there's more stuff on those creeks. It'd be more expensive to go up and buy the rights back, through some emergency measure to save fish and to save forests and bring the nutrient back upstream and all the things you could use. But now it's going to be, would have been cheap back in the 70s and 80s.
So we need a couple more solutions. And then
I'm a firm believer in civic and direct action too, and it does work. Both Colin and I are involved. We have a good-sized sailboat, and we're part of the combined effort, kind of spearheaded by tribal groups and the Lummies. We stopped the largest coal port, terminal on the West Coast, and other coal port terminals up and down the Washington coast. There was an action, you were probably there in Seattle when there was Shell oil was sending up.
Shell oil?
Yeah. And they decided to bail on that project. And I think when people rise up and speak out and get their bodies out there in a nonviolent way, but still, a real noticeable way, people pay attention and you get good results. So, and I think, that's clearly, people have used that edge of the cliff scenario, and it really is, that's what we have to do. And I think there's plenty of people that want to jump in to get, we just got to, keep up the energy and give people an outlet. People want to help, want to pitch in, but don't quite know where to go or when or how.
Yep.
And so.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, yes.
Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate everything everyone said. Hopefully it could tie some things together. I have been working for like 12 years in nonprofit organizations and trying to find solutions to the different problems: agriculture, healthcare, education, job creation, microfinance, livelihoods, all these things. And it seems like the more we go at it with like the numbers thing and these small victories and all of this, it's just like they're just dragging us along and just kind of pimping us out slow and just like, oh, another victory, and they just stab us in the back somewhere else, and we know it. But it's like the best of the best. We just gotta be optimistic and all that. But it's like that direct action works. Like when you get in your boat, when you go to the river, when you know what you're doing, you put the boughs in the river, you collect the eggs, you eat. It's real life. It's real. It's not boring. It's fun. Your friends are there. It's real. It's actual life. It's like not something they stole from you and you're talking about with your kids. Like the kids are there playing. Everyone's there. So, for the last 14 years, I've been traveling, trying to find people who's doing something. And lately I've been running with Granny Finn. And maybe you know Fenicia Medrano. For the last 30 years, she's been on horseback in California, planting seeds and digging biscuit roots and yampa and wild onion and blue pigs and lilies, and sharing this information with native tribes mostly, because they're pretty much the only ones who's out there and who care, unless it's like random people camping right on these lands, in this Forest Service land. And we were at the Paiutes in the Pyramid Lake last week digging root, and there's like 400 kinds of different biscuit root, and it's like real food. And she just collects seed and replants like guerrilla style for the last 40 or 30 years. And a lot of what she's doing is obviously like, you gotta just get up and do it. And I don't know, like besides that, I don't know how else to bring everything back into the ecosystems besides just like, you say, what do you want it to look like? Is it nomadic? Are these camps? Are we all roving around? Or are there communities? What are we basing our communities out of? What are we planting? Which seeds? And she's introducing old things that used to be part of the culture, like, real life.
Restoration, that's great. Yeah.
Wild. She says if you don't have anything wild left to breed back to, a species will die. If it's a plant, an animal, or a human, if there's nothing wild left, like all the dogs look all messed up, there's no wolves left. Like,
yep, exactly. That's
same with humans.
Yeah, that's how our world works. We've long said the water, if the water is well, then we're well. If the ancient forests are well, and all of those places where the natural animals live, then we're well, and our children are well, and so is the future of all the human children and non-human children into the future. So, I just wanted to share a couple things before we move on to a large vision. I'm the founder of Protectors of the Salish Sea, and so we have gone out there. We have gotten some results. We shut down big banks, stopped climate change, Chase Bank, work with 350 Seattle. We occupied Olympia for 4 days, set up 4 Tarpees, just moved in between the giant cash registers, concrete cash registers, and demanded that they protect and restore our Salish Sea. And stop the LNG plant, the fracked gas plant that's been put on the Puyallup estuary. And we walked 40 miles for Chekoten for the Quaqualamitchin, for our ancestral beings, our higher beings that were put here before us. And we walked from Seattle to Tacoma, and with hundreds of people, and held our orca puppets, and sang our songs and prayed the whole way. And it was a beautiful time in a beautiful gathering in July of 2017. And so Doug Tolchin and I, we co-authored the Tok'tai Proclamation and introduced it along this walk that was brought forward by our organization, me and my relatives, Protectors of the Salish Sea, and we signed that, hundreds of people inside the Duwamish, their longhouse, the Duwamish people's longhouse, and so I wanted Doug to talk about the vision that he's been working on, and Doug and I have been talking about these things and working together, and is, since I guess we were at the symposium, right, for water science, and that's where we first met, and which was it was a musical presentation, an art presentation in a great big cathedral, St. Mark's in Seattle, with a huge cast and amazing work, and they had a symposium afterward, and it was all about water, all about our relationship with water and healing water. So I just wanted to make sure that we have time to talk about that work and the vision of the whale sanctuary that we proclaimed that we would bring home Tok'tai in the authoring of this Tok'tai Proclamation, that she's been a slave of entertainment for 49 years now, and so she's one of 45 that were taken from Penn Cove and brought into slavery, and all of them lived very short lives. These orca people, our relatives, that they kidnapped, just like they kidnapped our children. And the same thing now, Tok'tai cannot speak her language. They will not feed her if she speaks her language. And even when she was put in that pen with another orca, they couldn't communicate because they're from different tribes. They speak different languages, dialects. So 15 died during violent capture since the 60s and 70s, and all here taken from our Salish Sea. A great detriment served to one of those iconic beings that we made promises to as Indigenous people. And that gene pool of 60 of those Quaqualamitchin missing from the 75 now that we have it's very, very detrimental to their moving forward as a subgroup species. And so we, along with Orca Network, we went, and pulled on the water in our Snohomish canoe, and we're like, yeah, let's work on this. They were still calling Tok'tai Lolita, her slave name, but she has a name before that, an indigenous name. It means bright sunny day, a greeting of happiness and wellness, and not one of slavery. And so we decided that we'd work together and start leading this with Indigenous movement. And that's when we co-authored that Tok'tai Proclamation, and also proclaiming hundreds of people, and you can sign it, it's here, proclaiming the Salish Sea as Salish Sea Whale Sanctuary from this day forward. And I often ask people, how many people would like to live in a whale sanctuary? How many people would like that? And I certainly would, because our Coast Salish people never hunted these beings. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not part of our culture. Is Coast Salish, a lot of salmon, and those nations that do, I feel that is your Chalangit, that's your birthright, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But in the inward sea, that's something that we didn't do as Coast Salish people. So, a whale sanctuary, and doing that by the people, right? So I wanted Doug to talk on that and share the work that he's been doing, and let you have a chance to hear that.
Thank you, Paul. I know our remaining time is short, so maybe I'll try and give you a quick fast forward version, then maybe we could kind of get around the circle again and get people's thoughts or reactions and pluses and things like that. I'm just going to grab out to you all. I'll just pass to the right and left. So, as they say, pictures are worth 1,000 words, and so everybody knows we have orcas, and in the last few years there's been a return of the humpback whales, the Salish Sea, and kind of logarithmically increasing numbers, but we actually have a little bit over 20 species of baleen and toothed whales. Baleen whales being your humpback whales, fin whales, minke whales, and then your toothed whales being your orcas and dolphins and porpoises. But they're all whales. So when we speak about a whale sanctuary, and kind of the tagline to the Salish Sea Whale Sanctuary we're suggesting is bioregional protected area for whales, orcas, dolphins, and porpoises. What's interesting is if you look on the back side of this, you'll see a rather concise history that's hard to find of the whale sanctuaries of the world in the various nation states and island nations that have not created these whale sanctuaries. I mean, that's the way the whole planet was like a whale sanctuary planet. And they've been around for about 11 million years. Depending on which scientists you talk to, humans have been on Earth between 100,000 and 500,000 years. So that's kind of an interesting perspective to look at. But what I think what we're doing is we're not making a whale sanctuary, we're simply recognizing, recognizing, remembering, restoring what was put here by Creator. And largely by restraining our vices that affect them indirectly, maybe the vices of certain industrial corporations and shipping fleets that affect them more directly. And if you look at this, there is this interesting history of dozens of island nations, Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, Mexico, Ireland, and Australia that have declared their entire exclusive economic zones, which is 200 nautical miles from shore, pursuant to the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. That's like nation-state stuff, but no one's ever done a whale sanctuary in the continental United States or Canada. It's quite interesting. There are some little ones, the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, the American Samoa Whale and Turtle Sanctuary, but it's never been done before in Canada or continental US. The other thing, and what we're suggesting, is that this would not only be the first whale sanctuary in Turtle Island history, but it would also be the first international whale sanctuary in the Americas. There have been these nation state by nation, but this would be the first international one. But not only that, that's still a creature of this nation state corporation mindset. So actually what we're suggesting is this would be Earth's first bioregional whale sanctuary, proclaimed by the inhabitants of the watershed surrounding the sanctuary itself, not petitioning and begging people in Ottawa and Washington, D.C. for permission to do it with them in control afterwards. It's for us to come together as inhabitants here, 8 million people, and simply agree among ourselves that this is the way it is, occupy our watershed. And just agree and shift the indignity of explanation onto Ottawa and Washington, D.C. to tell us we can't do this. Sort of like marijuana. Somebody put it on the ballot, yes or no, federal government said you have no right to decide, but just did it anyway, didn't ask for permission. And then it's going to sort out whether you believe that was right or wrong or whatever. It shows the power of the people to do something the federal government says only they have the right to do. And right now, and I speak with people at NOAA and so forth, they act like they're the only ones who can proclaim marine sanctuaries. Right. So I think that we have the great honor and responsibility of being able to pioneer a new type of marine sanctuary that's never been done. There's 14 U.S. national marine sanctuaries. They end at the shoreline, they're out in the ocean. The people are not involved. It's run by NOAA, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Commerce. It doesn't make sense. So we can do a bioregional whale sanctuary here, which would not only be the Salish Sea itself, but it would also include all the tributary rivers and creeks that the orcas depend on the salmon, so forth. So it would include all the tributary rivers and creeks, not only within this part, which is the Salish Sea Bioregional Core, but don't forget, or recognize maybe for the first time many people, this whole upper Fraser River watershed all drains down the Fraser River and provides 80% of the fresh water entering the Salish Sea. You know why that is? Because this is where 80% of the salmon spawning habitat is. Yeah. But the people who live here in Seattle, Valley, and Vancouver, they do not even know 99% of them. This is the sacred headwaters of their bioregional watershed community. And that's why one of the things I believe we need to do, one of the things, colonists knew that there was great power, and it was the first thing that came in there was mapping, and naming was claiming. But I think in this kind of bioregional watershed conscious movement, if we know that that has been true in the past as a powerful thing, perhaps remapping and renaming could be reclaiming. But then reclaiming for what? For what purpose? Is it who owns the land or this or that? Or is it maybe as a central agreement, one sentence to put in the middle of the whole thing, to restore natural animal populations throughout our bioregion to more than 50% of historic levels? But I believe the place to start, this could happen everywhere all at once, like this summer and autumn. And I believe a lot of seeds have been planted, and this could happen, particularly the tribes and First Nations of the Vancouver Island, the Makah, Quinault, Quileute, Ho, who were very involved in calling in, have decades of experience creating this Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary in partnership with the state of Washington and the United States. This is actually a very interesting role model. Most of the people who live here don't even know there's a National Marine Sanctuary out here. And that's been protecting the sea otters that are out here. But to actually do not just a little 3,000 square mile one, but a 250,000 square mile area for which we have a reasonable factual basis to assert kind of a newer, different type of sovereignty. One that has to do with inhabitants, watershed, and protecting and restoring the natural animal populations. And I believe if we start with the nucleus of it here and projecting out 200 nautical miles to assert bioregional co-governance over these waters, that Canada and the US say this is theirs to decide what happens. I believe if we start knowing what's happening and we start making the rules, I believe that we can become the dominant influence throughout this area.
Like the stewards?
At least. Maybe even just, almost like DocuBot, like creators, co-creators of life on a scale of restoration that has not happened in North America. But I believe the key is to start with the whale sanctuary. There's about 3,000 species in here, but I think in order to inspire people to do the things and to refrain from doing the things that need to be done and not done, it has to be based on love. And while a lot of people love to eat salmon or, love nature and stuff, what they actually feel love for is the orcas, the whales, the dolphins, the porpoises. And what's good for the 20 species of whale people is good for the other 3,000 species. What needs to be done for them to be healthy and thriving is what needs to be done for all the animals to be healthy. Right? You need to bring back the salmon for the orcas. You need to bring back the herring for the salmon.
The ancient forests for the salmon.
You need to bring back the eelgrass meadows and the kelp forests for all the forage fish, sardines, anchovies, surf snow, salmons. You need the sea otters to protect the kelp forests from the sea urchins, wiping them out. Right? We have to restore the whole web of life. But I think to motivate everyone to do it, to get very quick agreement, I believe the Salish Sea Whale Sanctuary is the great first step. And then the second step is then to take it from the sea to the tops of all, these are the tops of all the mountains, the water shedding towards the sea. And then away this. And I think the second step could be to proclaim as a watershed community the bioregional marine sanctuary to the tops of the mountains. This is a draft proclamation that will become signable within somewhere between one season and 1 year. When this does, we'll want to gather more than 1 million blue ink signatures out of the 8 million people who live here, connected through email. Well, this is an agreement between all of us. And I think this will also be a role model for bioregional watershed communities to the south, to the north, from Bering to Baja, and then with the whale sanctuary actually connecting out to the Hawaiian Islands. And that being a bioregional, because our humpback whales all go down to Maui to make their babies, and then they all come back. So I believe we essentially want to form a confederacy of bioregional watershed communities that also extends out to Hawaii, and not limited to the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. This is to assert that, to challenge Canada and the United States, that this does not belong to them. But actually, I believe longer term, we want to proclaim responsibility, stewardship, protection, monitoring, enforcement to all points of water that are closer to our shorelines than any other shorelines. And I believe the indigenous people and the other inhabitants who live here can all come together and agree on these things and work together on that, placing these whale people, animal people in the middle and reorganizing human society and countries around that, with them always in the center and forefront. So that's my... For this group, we do have these Chekoten proclamations here that just proclaim two things. One, that Chekoten, the last surviving southern resident orca of 60 babies that were taken, which is why they're now an endangered species, because they're mostly females and young. She's the last surviving one, she's in Miami, but also something that hasn't been called for yet, which is the last surviving northern resident orca to come back, which is the current Shamu at SeaWorld in San Diego, also known as Corky 2. So we want to get those two back like this year, and there's a plan for that, and there's some things coming, and kind of further conversation. But over here, if we can all be connected by email, we can even create a little group and just stay in touch.
Well, and you're also saying that we can offer to do petitions?
That's coming.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're kind of waiting on some different kinds of blessings to come through Saanich and Lummi and the different Salish nations, hopefully Makah, Quinault, Jamestown, to make this signable, put it into a final form. It's in draft consultation, make it final, and open it up for signing throughout the bioregion. So hopefully that'll happen also within a season or a year.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Make it easy for everyone.
If you get the First Nations, it's brilliant. I mean, the whole approach is fantastic. Good luck.
Thank you.
Where do we sign our names?
Yeah, right here. And the great thing about having a whale sanctuary is that those things that are at threat to the circle of life, to the salmon, to the orca people, to our children, such as 400 jumbo oil tankers via Canada, now used to be Kinder Morgan, Trans Mountain Pipeline, but Canada bought it, and it's their project now. So we could write into law that these are not allowed in our waters. It's a whale sanctuary. We're not going to transport, 1 million barrels of oil per day across our whale sanctuary with an 87% chance of a spill. We're not going to do it, and the people won't allow it. And that can be written by the people too.
Listen, some of us in the world are retired.
I think this guy had something.
Going off that, so I really like the idea, but who are the groups that aren't going to like this idea? Like, who do we need to start buttering up? Or, like, what the baby whale haters will be. Are we talking about fishing restrictions? So are we going to have to start talking about the fishing retreat, the recreational fishing?
Well, the oil refineries outside of Anacortes will happy.
Yeah, so what are we, who's going to be opposed to this idea that you've seen?
Well, we'll find out, but I will just share with you all, we have surveyed thousands of people over the last several years, and well over 99% of everyone has said, given the opportunity to vote yes or no on that entire agreement there, Or the Salish Sea Whale Sanctuary, simple concept, yes or no. Well over 99% of everyone surveyed has said they will vote yes, given the opportunity to vote on it. So to me, the fraction of 1% that say no, hey, good, they may have some good constructive debate to offer, and that's fine, but this is an unprecedented hyper-supermajority thing.
Well, I think that it's that way now, but once people start advertising against it, people who have money, or corporations who have money who might want to stop it, that might go down a little bit from 99%.
Yeah.
I think the idea of...
Welcome the dialogue. And of course, all of those larger scale industrial corporations and mouthpieces and representatives who come forward, it'll be good to listen to them and hear what their concerns and things are. But at the end of the day, they're going to be viewed as baby whale haters, and they're not going to be able to stop this. And this area does not belong to them. It maybe belongs to the indigenous people, maybe the indigenous animal people, maybe everyone who lives here. We can have a good conversation in the range, but it certainly doesn't belong to Monsanto or to Kinder Morgan Corporation or to any of those fictitious people. It belongs to the real animal people, tree people, human people, right? So we need to stand.
I think the story of Initiative 1531, the carbon fee, is really fresh in everyone's mind. What was it, $30 million pumped in by 5 oil companies that defeated an initiative that wasn't perfect, but was pretty darn close. And so it's this idea of like, can the money of these few corporations overwhelm people? And I think that we can look at the difference between the messaging that can be confused around a carbon fee, carbon tax. That it was really easy for them. They'd already defeated the carbon tax a couple of years ago. It was really easy for them to create public confusion about what that meant. Right. Whale sanctuary is pretty simple when it gets down to it. And so I have more hope for whale sanctuary and the messaging around that. But we do have to look at that at the past and inform how we use our grassroots power in our communities to promote this idea of the sanctuary, so that that we can be creating the clarity around what that is and what that will look like, so that when these companies try and pump millions and millions of dollars into a public confusion campaign, we already know what's going on.
Yeah, and one of the things that carbon tax didn't have, and the proponent of it, was the universal love for these marine mammals, these amazing, majestic beings. And so there was nothing there that was tangible to love and protect, and people just can't move beyond something to even see their own children, but they can see these majestic beings in their hearts and minds. So there is something to this that's beyond that too.
And this is not a tax.
Yeah.
We're not a tax with whales. This is a life proposal.
Right.
But can anyone ever remember being, and ultimately I believe we will put some of the stuff on the ballot, but also let's not be in a rush to get on the ballot. Let's start by letting everyone read and understand and sign the old-fashioned way, not collectivism, blue ink, person to person, when the time is right. Do that first. Then the second step is the survey. The Chilean whale sanctuary. I mean, just to show you how quickly and amazingly this can all happen. Look at the Chilean whale sanctuary example. It started off with one person, we don't know their name, had the idea. They teamed up with artisan fishermen, small-scale fishermen, and environmental people and groups. And they campaigned, and they did it creatively. Then they did a survey, and the survey showed, by the way, the proposal was that the entire exclusive economic zone of Chile, so almost the whole west coast of South America, out 200 miles, to become whale sanctuary. They did a survey, they found more than 98% of Chilean people said yes, there should be Chilean whale sanctuary. So the survey was good. Then they brought it, because they don't have the right of citizen voter initiative the way we do, but what they did is they brought that information, vision, and consensus to Michelle Bachelet, the woman president of Chile at the time, and said, look, the people have spoken. You claim to represent the people. This is what 98% want. Work with us to put in legislative language, bring it to the legislature to vote for it. Guess what percentage of the legislature voted yes or no the first go-round? 100% voted yes. Where do you get that? With any legislature, 100%. This whole process, beginning to end, from the initial idea to 100% of the legislature, 2 years, 2006 to 2008. And then you know what happened? 1 year later, somebody in Brazil said, look what Chile just did. Why don't we do that for Brazil's easy? But let's do it one better. Let's make ours the Brazilian whale and dolphin sanctuary. And within 2 years being in, they did it. And within 2 years after that, Uruguay. Yeah. And it was like dominoes. And I think what we're going to see is we're going to do the Salish Sea Whale Sanctuary, and we're going to show that a bioregional whale sanctuary is so much more comprehensive and holistic and serious about all the web of life that these whales depend on. We're going to take this way beyond any whale sanctuary the world has ever seen in terms of its profundity and then what you're going to see, I believe you're going to see this like dominoes, because the gray whales migrate up and down the whole coast. The humpback whales from here to Hawaii and also down to Panama and so forth. We're connected. But as bioregional watershed communities, like dominoes, Bering to Baja and out to Hawaii, kind of almost like the Iroquois Confederacy back in the day of the Great Law of Peace, Great Treaty of Peace, Great Peacemaker, the roots of the U.S. Constitution, and 2/3 of the world's democracies. There's a whole story there I encourage you all to look into. Yeah. But this could be kind of like that. But even more beautiful, and love-based. And what we're for, and what we're co-creating together. And we'll measure it, and monitor it, and report back to everyone how many whales we had last year, how many this year, and each year after that. And we'll all be part of it. And we'll make it really easy for all 8 million people to be part of it. By participating in the survey, the signature gathering, the vote under the provincial and state, only if the legislatures and the parliament refuse to do it. But we don't want to rush to them. The power shouldn't be in them to do it. It should be us. We, the people of the Salish Sea Bioregional, proclaiming it. That's the key. First. And then we compel the cities, counties, states, provinces to harmonize their thing. But ultimately, the primary authority for the water, woods, and wildlife of this whole bioregion, I believe, longer term, needs to be shifted gradually out of these municipal corporations in charge of the water, woods, and wildlife to actually new government that we all need to form, which it is our right to alter or abolish governments in whole or in part and form new government, right? That creates life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, this is in the founding documents. So this is what I believe.
Yeah, very good. One thing that we need to know is that the closing ceremony is happening at 3:45, so we could stay here and talk longer, but I think a lot of people are probably going to want to be there for that closing ceremony. So thank each and every one of you for coming here to share your heart about our Salish Sea and keep working, keep sharing the word about all the work that's happening and direct action now. Stand up for all life and the future generations. We'll see you. Thank you.